So putting it bluntly, do you feel safe on USC's campus?
That's kind of like a hard question because I do in some ways and then I don't in other ways.
USC is a school based on a sense of community.
A community shared between students, faculty, staff, and even the surrounding neighborhood.
With a wide variety of guests, from professionals to students,
Behind the Scenes at SC is a safe place for discussing and learning about issues that directly impact USC students.
Made by students for students.
And anyone else who's curious.
We hope you take something valuable away from these episodes, just as we did by making them.
Thank you for listening.
Welcome back to Behind the Scenes at SC. I'm Hunter Morris, and this week's episode will dive deeper into how students perceive safety at SC, particularly in regard to USC's responses to sexual assault on campus. We have two amazing student guests with us here today, and I'd love for you both to tell us a little bit more about yourselves. Olivia, if you'd like to start.
Hi, my name is Olivia Deaton. I'm a senior here at USC, and I'm just really passionate about women's issues and sexual assault, and I just care about opening up this conversation so that more women feel safe.
And Ramis?
My name is Ramis Baig. I'm a junior business cinematic arts major, and I joined this podcast basically because in terms of issues that are swept under the rug, not just at USC, but in colleges as a whole, this, I would say, is one of the top three, if not like the number one issue that's widespread, but I don't think anybody really talks about it in depth. So I think this is a good opportunity to really expose it. And since we have a male and a female on here, we'll have multiple perspectives.
I'm definitely glad that you're both here to have this conversation and open up this discussion. Olivia, if you could speak a little bit to what it's like being a female on a campus like USC's, where there's so much questionable and oftentimes illegal behavior like this happening.
Unfortunately, I don't think it's limited to USC. I actually transferred, and I felt the same way at my previous institution that I do here at USC. I think it's kind of something that's you're taught from an early age. So I kind of assumed that this was gonna be an issue. So I've never really been surprised by anything in terms of sexual assault or harassment. I've always kind of been preparing for it in a way, which I don't think is exclusive to USC. But I do know that the party culture at USC is a lot more intense at other schools, and I think that can contribute to some of USC's reputation.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate reality.
Yeah.
Ramis, as a male, do you feel the same, or do you believe that your experience is wholly different than that?
Yeah, I'd say I feel pretty similar in that it's fairly well known that, in college, these things happen. There are illegal activities. It's any sort of college with a vast party culture. Well, this, in my opinion, this is basically that taken up to 11, right? I mean, everything in USC is a larger than life version of, I think, what happens in a regular college or community college. So naturally, the downsides would also be boosted to that extent. But I think it might sort of create a rippling effect that strains the relationship between the sexes.
So leading off of that point, sexual assault has long been an issue, but right now it seems this moment it's getting a lot more attention. So both specifically to USC and to the nation as a whole, what do you think is inspiring this change or this shift in the public mentality towards sexual assault reports?
I think the Me Too movement in Hollywood has a lot to do with it. I think the Me Too movement has empowered a lot of women to come forward and has given women more confidence to come forward. But at USC specifically, like we were mentioning, the vast amount of reports that were just in one semester, like the fact that it was over 7 or something like that, I think that's also sparked a lot of motivation in people to actually make a change and speak out against it. So I think the fact that USC kind of has a history with this is building up this motivation in students to go out and speak against it.
It feels like it's different to the other years. Of course, there were scandals that happened before, but it seems to be anomalous, with just how many of them are coming out almost simultaneously.
Definitely. And that's not to say that these instances weren't happening before,
Oh yeah, no, not at all.
which it just might be now people are starting to
Mhm.
speak about it
Yeah, it's
more publicly.
sort of just a shift in culture, I guess. It just
Abs-
took time, pretty much.
Absolutely. So speaking about these instances at USC and being students on this campus, how do you feel that public stories such as this affect dating on campus or relationships in general?
I think like as a woman, I have to be a lot more careful about like who I'm meeting up with on like, from dating apps. There is like that element of like I have to make sure that this person is like not going to hurt me and is not like a serial killer or something. That I think I'm more paranoid about, that I think my friends are more paranoid about. And just like, yeah, just being really careful about knowing who you're meeting. And anytime, like when my friends go on dates in the past, like I have their location on and I make it very clear to them, like if you need me to come pick you up, if you need anything, I'll be there. And that's something that I think is more like prevalent now, that I'm more scared of now for my friends.
Men are dropping out of the dating marketplace now, I think, and that contributes to it. It's not entirely contributing, but it's become a major factor. So I think the increase in these cases has benefits, definitely, but it also has a lot of drawbacks that both genders are experiencing. It's sort of, in my opinion, increased the fear between them when it comes to dating. Like there's a sort of sense of tension now. It's no longer sort of as comfortable in general, I think. There's always sort of a lingering tension of like, is someone here gonna get either socially damaged or physically or emotionally? It's just become a thing at this point. It's become something that's prevalent.
I understand like the fear of like false accusations, but I do think the reality is that like 98% of women are telling the truth. And in terms of dating, I don't think that you should be like fearing that you're going to be falsely accused by some random person. And if that does happen, I mean I think that's like a very rare occurrence, but it's not rare that people are sexually assaulted.
So putting it bluntly, do you feel safe on USC's campus?
That's kind of like a hard question, because I do in some ways and then I don't in other ways. I think just like as a smaller, younger woman living in downtown Los Angeles, I don't feel safe like walking home alone at night. I'm definitely like very cautious of that. On the other hand, I walk to and from school every single day by myself, and I have a class that gets out late at night at like 10 p.m. and I feel comfortable enough to walk home by myself. However, I do so in like an abundance of caution. I carry like pepper spray, and I've taken self-defense classes because I'm very aware of the risks. So like I do feel enough confidence because of like the training that I've had in self-defense to walk home, but it's not something that I'd always prefer to walk back with someone. And I'm like, every time I'm walking home, I'm very like hyper aware of my surroundings and kind of always looking over my shoulder. And I guess I'm a little bit paranoid.
Obviously, I'm not in as much danger as you because I am a 6'2", possible, I think 190 something pound man. I think everybody to different degrees has to be extremely vigilant, but definitely smaller women especially are, I think, at the most risk. They're like the highest risk. So yeah.
Do you trust your fellow peers if you were in a social situation where there's drinking or people are partying and where the instances such as these sexual assault reports seem to happen? Do you trust your peers in those situations?
Probably, but there might be sort of a group of them or a minority or a type of guy out there that is definitely just repeatedly going to do this. And yeah, I feel like since this discussion concerns frats, I feel like I would say the exclusive nature of them adds to the sort of sense of entitlement that these guys get.
Olivia, how about you? Do you trust your peers at USC?
I think what's scary is, most women are assaulted by someone that they know personally. And so it's not just some like random person on the street that's doing this to you. It's someone that you know and potentially trust, which kind of scares me a little bit. I'd say overall I trust my peers, but I do think that there's something to be said. Like most of these cases happen with someone that you know or are even dating, and that kind of scares me because I don't think there is a type of person that assaults someone. I think it can be anyone, and that's just scary.
Going off that point, I have a statistic that I want to read for you both and get your reaction to. According to a study conducted by the AAU and WeStats, 1 in 3 female undergrads at USC said they were sexually assaulted, compared to 1 in 4 undergrads nationally. Why do you feel at USC that number might be higher?
I think what we've been talking about, party culture at USC, has a lot to do with it. USC is known for their frat parties, and also the rape culture at USC is kind of, I don't want to say normalized, but kind of just accepted. I think that is probably has a lot to do with why the number of women being assaulted is higher at USC compared to other universities.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point because at the beginning of this podcast, we all pretty much universally just said it's a thing that happens.
Yeah.
Which is, yeah, that's looking back on it, it's pretty shocking at how it's literally just accepted to the point where you don't even think about it until you do think about it, and then you just realize that's how widespread it is. As for my thoughts on why it's widespread in USC, I'd say again with the sort of exaggeration of party culture, thus everything else gets exaggerated. I think that's why it happens, right? The attitudes, the types of parties, everything here is just sort of a character of real life, right? And so I think, yeah, like I said, everything's gonna be turned up to 11. Even the worst sides of party culture, unfortunately, are part of that. Everything is elevated, so you're going to see an uptick in sexual assault cases here as well.
So I mean, we've been talking a lot about fraternity culture and how that may impact why this number is higher at USC. So I was wondering if both of you could paint a picture of some of the things that happen at these frat parties that you think might lead to an increase in sexual assault. Why is it so prevalent on USC at these parties?
I do think that part of the reason why sexual assault occurs so much in frats is the way the Greek life system is kind of built. So for those of you who don't know, frats are the ones that host the parties, and sororities are not allowed to host parties. And sororities are also not allowed to have like open drinks. And I know this because 2 of my roommates are in a sorority. But I think the fact that it's separated that way, like frats throw the parties, frats supply the alcohol, and sororities aren't allowed to take place in that. You already like women in sororities already lose like a sense of autonomy. They don't have they don't control the drinks. They don't bring in drinks. They don't supply the drinks. And they also can't throw their own parties. So you're already walking into a situation where like you aren't in control of the setting of like what's being supplied, what's going on. So I think that plays a huge role in why, like, from the ground up, how in the history of like of the Greek life system, I think that plays a huge role in sexual assault. Also, I have been, I mean, if you're a girl and you're not part of a sorority, like they'll let you into a frat party. I've never been part of a sorority, but I've never had an issue joining a party if I wanted to. And that's not the same for men. If you're a guy that's not in a frat and you want to go to a frat party, you have to know a guy that's in that frat.
Yeah, you've got to be a +1.
Exactly.
Girls get in free. That's something that's
Yeah.
established.
Yes, because frats want to increase the amount of women that are in attendance, and they'll let anyone in. So they want to have more women than men, and that promotes that like hookup culture and just like I don't know, that I think that just plays a huge role.
The way that Olivia was talking about how they're set up, it seems like they're basically in control of the structure of it. They're the ones setting it up. They're the ones who have a sort of view on how it operates. They're, I don't want to say in 100% control, but the vast majority of the control is theirs. So that might be the main factor.
I think the 2 key points we're getting at through this conversation are that there's an imbalance of power set up immediately by frats hosting these parties, supplying the drinks, demanding that women can get in for free as much as they want, and it's harder for guys. But also the normalization that is just around these conversations. So I was wondering if you could speak to ways that could potentially change, and the importance of speaking about these issues so that it's not something that's normal and it's something that should be happening rarely, and talked about, hopefully less and less as these conversations continue to grow.
As a woman, like, I've always been told this is going to happen and you need to do what you can to protect yourself. So it's kind of been normalized to, it's been normalized for women to expect it and then take measures themselves, like, always watch your drink, always travel in pairs, like, and that's important because it does help. But I think the fact that it's normalized to, like, put a lot of the responsibility on women, like, just taking action to protect themselves, that kind of, that's unfortunate normalization. I think in order for this to change, people need to be educated on consent, not just in college, but in high school. And then on the college level, talking about these issues is obviously, like, even this podcast is a really good way to open up the conversation and to, get people to see a different perspective.
I think to that point, that's a great time to bring up that for this podcast, we were trying to get guests that were on the administrative side of USC, but it seemed that they were very hesitant to speak on this issue publicly. So that's why we have two students here today that are willing to speak, and very glad that you are. So it's definitely a very different dynamic when thinking about how the administration has to respond to these situations publicly.
I wish that USC was more open to having these conversations. We mentioned that it was kind of hard to get people from USC on this podcast, which kind of, not only does it make the subject a little taboo, more taboo and stigmatized, but it's just unfortunate because I think openness and discussion is the best way to solve this issue.
We all know that it happens in colleges, right? But the fact that people treat it as normal, I think, is sort of the line where we need to switch back to treating it as an anomaly, as something that shouldn't be regarded as normal. It should still be kept widespread knowledge. Everyone should, like, realize that it happens, right? Know how it happens, possibly why it happens. But I think when it is communicated that it happens, it needs to go back to being treated as not just another incident. It needs to be pointed out, especially so that the normalization aspect of it is countered. That, I think, that specific part of it is the root of the problem, where that's really what contributes to it being swept under the rug.
I think it's important to say that this is, like, a really complicated issue because even when cases are reported and stuff, there's a lot of inherent biases that are, like, embedded within the structure of, the reporting process that also need, like, I think a lot of things need to change. I think we need more training on sexual assault, but I also think that like, the reporting process needs to be examined as well, and looking at, like, how are we handling cases that are being reported, who is in charge of that, who is, like, talking to the victim, who, like, what support is the victim getting. It's just very complicated. I think discussions have to happen in every single area of this issue, not just like to college students on consent. I think it has to happen in, like, every level in the workforce and every structure.
I think that's a great point for us to end on as well. Olivia, Ramis, I want to thank you both for being here today. I think this was a super insightful conversation, and hopefully our listeners will be able to take away the same things that we were able to from this conversation and be able to learn a little bit more about this topic.
On behalf of our team, we want to thank you for listening with open ears and an open heart. We urge you to continue to discuss these issues and work together as a community to create a dialogue that progresses us forward. Thank you to our producers, Jackson Kroof and Christy Taiwo Makanjola, our post-media manager, Vince Gonzalez, our composer, Joel Jimenez, and last but certainly not least, our guests. Please like and subscribe. Fight on.